Good to see everybody. So when we wrapped it up there, when we stopped, we were talking about how there's at least here in Baltimore, maybe in other larger churches, there's a larger body of maybe elders, and out of that, maybe a smaller group of like those men are chosen who actually become the elders that govern the church and have a vote. And then Andy started asking me a question which brought up something that was very good that it was said. And so maybe this is the situation in a large church, all right? A lot of elders, we choose some of them like we have here in Baltimore. But you could have a situation in a small church, which many of our churches are, where it's sort of like the ratio changes. You don't have too many people in your church that are really qualified elders, but to fill out your board, you've got a larger group of people. They're not really qualified elders, but they're put on the elders board just so you have enough guys to be making those decisions. So just realize that it can happen different ways and different times. So here, maybe you talk about the board of elders, but no, they're not really all biblical, scriptural elders. They're just guys. They're the best we got, you know. So we're going to get back to this in a little while, really shortly. But I just want to put that out there as part of our what we're thinking about tonight. Does anybody have a joke they want to tell? I'm sorry, I'm just suddenly hitting. I'm a little bored here. I see now that I thought you raised your hand there, Pastor Bob, to tell a joke. You were just. Oh boy! 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 Yes.
Wouldn't you say that was something what he was describing about his church?
Well, I'm going to get to that in a sec. He's been holding out on me. He's been giving me information in dribs and drabs, and the story keeps on getting better. I started off like horrified a couple of days ago, and now it's like I told me he's living the dream. So we'll get back to that in a few minutes here in a little while. So anyway, yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so if anybody has a joke they want to tell, I would appreciate that. It's just hard for me to go on and on here, but okay. Now, in the undergraduate course, Leadership 440, that you're going to be responsible for, you're going to be tested on, like, there's specific lecture. I didn't ask you to listen to the whole course, as a prereq, but we picked out, I don't know, a dozen or 2 dozen of the 36 lectures. Included in that, there should be information about the spiritual goals that are met by the structure of Greater Grace World Outreach boards. That's like the 2-board system we have. I want you to understand why it's set up that way and what it accomplishes. Okay, I'm not going to go over that right now, but I'm going to talk about, and I don't want you to get the 2 questions mixed up, all right? One is the spiritual goals that are accomplished. And this, what we're going to address now, we talk about it in Lead 440. If you've listened to the material, you've heard it. But I'm going to say it again because I think we're getting better and better at this. But we're back to the Board of Elders, all right? And we understand there may be other elders, but that's the board. So the pastor is on that board, right? Along with other guys, okay? And because we're people, because we're not machines, there's a relationship that's going to occur here that is over and above just being on a voting governmental board, okay? So, I mean, if you just take it, out of the church world just into the corporate world, you could say that, what's really the function of a board member? To show up at the board meeting, right? To propose motions, engage in debate about those motions, and then vote yes or no when those motions are brought up, when it's time to vote on them like that. You can look at it that way. And in some ways, that is the function of it. And really, what is the power of someone on any board? What's the power of someone on a board of elders? is they've got a vote. That is their power. When they cast that vote, they are, that is their, in some ways, that, as far as a governing board, that is their function, their role. But even, in the corporate world, but certainly in the church world, because we're people, we're sitting in a room with other people, those personal relationships, it's impossible that those personal relationships don't come into play. It has to happen that way, right? In this class, like at some level, there's a personal relationship that I have with you, certainly as a group, but as individuals also. I'm watching your faces, I'm looking at the feedback. You could drive me out of this classroom and just stare at me with a blank look, and I won't last the week because I'm a person. I'm unable to do that. I'm not Finnish. I can't handle it. All right. So you have, there we go. You gotta laugh or something there. All right. And this is what happens in the board room, kind of for two reasons. Sure. There might be a larger body of elders that he's picked, that that the board has put on that actual board. But why were those people chosen out of the larger body of elders? Because they're the godliest, most spiritual, most qualified guys. You're going to pick the best. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to kind of say it as an aside here, and it's in the undergraduate course, is that, now get this, because this will save you all sorts of grief. You never put someone on a board to minister to them, okay? Do not do that, all right? That's not the place to be raising up leadership on the board, okay? You do that somewhere else, because once you put someone there, great problems can ensue when you make a mistake. And I think I mentioned that before. So we've taken the best of these guys, the most highly qualified, the godliest, the greatest prayer warriors, the men of greatest wisdom, and we've put them here. And included in that discussion, that you put, anytime you put someone on, any team, but certainly on this team also, that just the personal relationship comes into play. You might have a great guy, but do I really want to sit in a room with him and have discussions? Well, maybe not, right? So it might not be the best thing to put that person that you kind of don't gel so well with into this room. And I'm not talking about personality report. I'm just talking about some people are more prickly, more difficult to work with. So you've put guys there that hopefully you can see yourself working with. All right? So the best guys, and guys, they've made a decision, we can work with this guy. Be great to have him. Like, we like this guy, So that's how you get in that room. So, and then the pastor, along with these other amazing elders that are in that room, they are people, and they are in need of personal relationship like we all are, right? People need friends, people need comrades, people need people in the trenches with them. That's how my mind works. When I have a guy who's on my team and we're fighting for it together, I become close to that. I trust that guy, because we've been through some fire, and there's a bond that's developed there, which is not like other bonds that are out there. So you have relationships being developed here, and then also, I'll be very honest with you. I say this the right way. I have a certain capacity. Like, I know God at a certain level. I know the Word of God at a certain level. My thought life is only so highly developed. We're working on it, but I've only gotten so far. And I might sit down with, I don't know. Well, I'll just give you an example. I guess this is going to go around the world, but when I'm in a room with Pastor Monty Servio, I'm in such respect of his gift and his wisdom and the stuff that he has to say and the stuff that comes out of him. I just want to listen to him talk, and maybe this is insecurity, but it is what it is. Do I have a whole lot to say to him? I really don't think I do. I just rather, I think he has more to say to me than I have to say to him. So in some sense, just his experience in his life and his walk with God and just who he is, he's my friend. He loves me. I love him. There's no problem there. But in terms of, am I really like a peer for him? I don't feel that way. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. But that's how I think. And I could think that way about any number of people. You know what I'm saying? What am I going to talk to him about God for? You can talk to me about God. And in that sense, like you got the pastor of the church, who really is who has the capacity to be a friend to him and to be a peer. Now, I'm not saying he thinks that way. I'm not saying that he's selective. I think he loves the whole body, and we have friends all over, and it's a great life. But in terms of talking about certain subjects, talking about the Word of God, talking about situations, what's Pastor Schaller's thought life about what's going on politically in this country? Like, I have a thought life about it. Maybe in that field I could have a conversation with him, but who can really like be his, I don't want to say spiritual equal, but like his intellectual, to be able to talk to on that level, and there's some people that can carry that on better than others. You know what I'm saying? And like even with the group of people here, right? I'm going to have a different conversation with Pastor Bob and the pastors because they've experienced some of these things than I would have with other people here who just have not been in that arena. Like we have conversation that just other people could watch but couldn't contribute because maybe you don't think about these things, you haven't been in that place. I'm not saying we wouldn't want you to contribute, but it would just go that way, okay? So the pastor is going to find in this room maybe some of his best friends, right? So that's, and he needs friends. These are guys who can really come alongside me. When, so-and-so elder says something to me, I might give it more weight than I would give Joe body member weight, maybe I would give some of these guys in some ways more weight than I would give to the guy that I go bowling with or I play tennis with or whatever we do. Maybe I would give these guys in some ways more weight, what they would say, than I would like my family that's very close to me. See what I'm saying? So, and this is just human need, it's reality. This is how it goes. So these guys will sit in this room, and in some ways, it's like the greatest day that they have in a given month. They look forward to being together. Hey, and so, another thing is, and I'm just saying, this is the reality of it. I like the people that know me better. Like, I never want to make a provision for the flesh, right? But the people that know me better, in some sense, I can relax and say things to them that might be not off, but like a little bit risky. Hey, I was thinking about this. I just had this strange thought last week. What do you think of that, And there's some people in this church that I can't do that with because they're going to take it. It's going to be like an opportunity for them to rebuke me, to quote a Bible verse and why that's off. It's like, okay, I get that, but can we have do you trust me enough not to let me sin, not to let me say things that are off, but just to have some maybe hypothetical conversations? Can we think about this theme and talk about it and not be insecure and then jump to this is it, that's it, black and white conversation over? And so that can happen in this room also. You know what I'm saying? And that, like, okay, like they go in this room. Hey, what do you think, guys? Is there something we can do better in this church? What would happen if we relocated our church from here to, I don't know, Glen Burnie or something? What would happen? And that conversation can happen in this room, right? But if you have it outside of that room, you have an opportunity of blowing the church up. You know what I'm saying? Because someone will hear it, someone will freak out. They'll start going from person to person saying, "We can't have this. Pastor said this. Could you believe? This can't happen." And that's how it can go. But that conversation can happen here. All right? And I think we understand it, and we all have friends and confidants, people that we can say, "Hey, you know what? Man, I've been working hard last week on the beat. I don't need someone to quote back to me, the Holy Spirit will quicken you." Like, okay, thank you for that. But can I just tell you how I'm doing today? You know what I'm saying? So this is the fact of the case. It's not, in some ways, yes, the business of the church at the highest level is being conducted, But there's other like personal business that goes on there that is just gonna happen, and it's necessary, and that's the way it is, because we are affected by those around us. So this, yes, let's get the mic going here.
Pastor, isn't it the case in our church that the senior pastor gets to choose like the elders who would be on the board, and like also like yesterday we spoke of transition, and
Right.
even in the case of a transition, then the elders resign, and then
Yeah, no, that's right, VJ. As far as adding new members to an existing board of elders, like if they want to add a 12th guy to our board of elders, I don't think the pastor just appoints that person. I think there's a vote of the elders. It might have to be unanimous. I'd have to go back and read the bylaws. But there is an important point that VJ brought up that I should have mentioned earlier, that I kind of left out, and we're going to digress for a second, then get back to this subject. But I kind of walked you through, on sort of a gut level, the process we have here in Baltimore for appointing a new pastor to the church, right? The final decision is made by the elders, but the congregation has had a ton of input and a shot at that decision before the elders make the final decision. The exact ins and outs of it, I don't have that clear in my head. But what VJ brought it up is like very important. Once the new pastor is chosen, okay, here's what our process calls for. Out of the whole board of elders, and right now we've got 11 of them, but of course this is saying the pastor just left, so we're down to 10. But now we're back up to 11 because the new pastor's there. He picks 2 elders out of the whole board, right? All the other elders resign, and then the pastor and his 2 hand-picked elders start appointing new elders to populate the board. That's how it works. They certainly can pick the ones that just resigned if they want to, but that's how it works. And the idea there is, number one, to give the new pastor a team that's comfortable with him, and number 2, to give sort of a mechanical way out for if they're guys who just are not on board the new program, even though they just voted for it, but they're just not going to work well in that situation. It gets them onto the next phase of their life instead of putting them in a place where it's just going to be uncomfortable and not going to work. Let's get the mic over there. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, just a comment then on that. In Peru, and I found out about that particular detail that you just said, but I found out about it after I left Peru.
Yeah.
I wish I'd thought about it before, but actually it was okay, because we were in Peru for 11 years, so we had ordained, I think, 6, 7 guys. In Lima, we had 5 different pastors, and those guys were the elders, the board of elders for the church.
Right.
When I left, that those guys, then we had one presiding elder, Pastor Arturo, and then there was 4 other guys. But some problems arose because one of the guys was not really, he's not a bad guy. He just wasn't, totally on board with the pastor, and so it was the best thing actually was doing that, and then saying, okay, you now there may be a transitional period with the 2 guys that stay, but then he picks his own elders that he feels can work with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's just very, it solves things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps that a lot, in a practical way.
Yeah.
And I can say that from, I think a lot of the things that we we learn that we learn by making our mistakes.
Right.
And then we come here and we learn from mistakes that you guys made.
That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So, and then we die, and someone else starts all over again. But yeah, it's like no fun having a grumpy guy on one of these boards, and because because our nature, like we like doing things in unity when we can. And sure, if it's always unified, I talked about maybe that's not the best situation, but our like what you'll end up with, practically speaking, because we're brothers, we love each other. You got one grumpy guy, and you'll find the rest of the board trying to accommodate that guy because you're not comfortable. You want to include him. Hey, he's got something to say. It's important. We want to get this. Thank you for that. And you do that. But what you end up is that one guy ends up like exercising like veto power over the board because we want unity. So every time he raises an objection, the whole thing stops. Hey, let's try and satisfy this guy. How can we make it work? Well, he's not happy. He had some questions. Well, let's get those questions answered and come back. And you can end up in a really just bad cycle that just doesn't work. And then in the church, because this is the other thing that happens, is that like there's and I think maybe I could say maybe we get a little bit mixed up in this, maybe we don't. But see, yeah, I'm just going to go for it because this is what I'm thinking, and I think it holds water here. I've never said this before, but you'll like this, or you'll hate it. Is that we like look at the Bible, and there is protection for pastors. You know what I'm saying? Like if you have an accusation to bring against somebody, let it, you have to bring the witnesses and build the case. And that whole thing, we end up like with the qualifications to be and remain an elder or a bishop, whatever term you want to use. That gets sort of included sometimes in our bylaws for what it takes to remove one of these guys, right? So we put someone on the board, we put someone on the governing board of elders, and then we want to remove them from the governing board, but that goes out into this realm, and we're saying, hey, wait a minute now, the gift and calling of God is without repentance. God made me a bishop, he gave me that gift, you recognize it. On what grounds are you taking this away? We hate working with you. Well, that's not grounds in the Bible, all right? What sins have I committed? Am I committing, what's wrong? And so that it becomes, the way we write our bylaws sometimes, it becomes more, maybe I'm saying possibly unnecessarily difficult to make a change here. I think all that we do apply it to the pastor, rightly so. Like, why would you remove the pastor of the church? Well, you got to have good reason to do that, and so there's tremendous protection for the pastor. But in terms of the rest of them, I don't know if it's I don't know if it should be as difficult as we make it, and that's just talking about our bylaws here. So we do the best we can. We do the best we can, Now the other side of it, do I want it to be easy to boot someone off? Like I'm unhappy with somebody who's voting against me. I don't want to just make a change just to make my life easier. You know what I'm saying? Because go ahead, and we'll take.
What is the difference between the term plurality of elders and the table of organization?
Yeah. So I kind of. I think maybe if you'd been here this morning, that would have been answered.
I wasn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I'm kind of concentrating on my credit students. Okay. And so I think there's ask one of them. All right? At the next break, ask one of them and see if you get an answer. I just don't want to go back and revisit that right now. Yeah.
Just making sure I didn't miss anything. You're talking about relationships within the board and how that affects the board, and then a different subject, which is picking a new group of elders.
Right, I digressed because VJ brought to my attention something I should have said in a previous class. Okay.
Sure.
And that's why I love questions, because you're helping me not miss stuff that I've missed. But yeah, now I'm going back to this. I went from one to the other, and now back to the original. So here we are. These dynamics exist on our boards. All right, these dynamics exist on our boards. Okay, I work on the board of trustees. I've been on the board of trustees for a long time here, And there it's just, it happens, okay? So really what you end up with is the guys who are on this board, they really end up with, and this is how we formulate it, with one official role, right? And then these guys end up with 3 unofficial roles. And I want you to be aware of that because it is probably, I don't want to say unavoidable, but it's highly likely that this can happen, just depending on how it goes. First of all, they're a voting, right, governmental board, okay? Voting governmental board, all right? And that is the official role. That's what you read the bylaws, that's what they're there to do. Show up at meetings and vote. That's their power, right? To advance, that's an abbreviation for governmental there, a voting governmental board. So that's the official role of this board. But you end up with these other unofficial but very real roles that it's a fact of life. You got to be aware of them. Number 2, so that's the official one. Now we're going to have 3 unofficial ones, all right? Okay, so the first unofficial one is they end up as counselors for the pastor, okay? And for a season, probably a couple years in the earlier days, I was not on the board of elders, but I did sit on the meetings for some years, and then it didn't really make sense that we were doing this, and we wisely stopped that practice, getting me out of there. But the pastor walks in, he's in a room with some of his best friends, right? What's the pastor interested in? Pastoring the church, seeing the work of God going forward. You know, he knows business needs to be conducted, but here I am with the most qualified, the best guys I got, and he'll talk about all sorts of things. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, certainly there's business to be conducted, but hey, what do you guys think of what's going on in our Sunday school? Yeah, that type of discussion comes up, which may be outside of the scope, but he's very interested in their input, and knowing that they are the ultimate authority of the church. If they start giving opinions, that he's going to take those opinions very seriously. Okay, so they become counselors for the pastor. Does it say anywhere in our bylaws that the purpose of the Board of Elders is to counsel the pastor? It doesn't say that at all, but it will and does happen, and I'm kind of glad it does. I mean, it's healthy that that's happening, okay? Sometimes I'll do it on the Board of Trustees, right? We've got some decision that's really an operational decision, but I'm not sure, and I'll ask a trustee, what do you think about this? Because if push comes to shove, it's going to come to that board. And there's been times when no one, like Pastor Barry Quirk is on site, works up at the day school, right? He's a member of the Board of Trustees. There's been times when everybody's out of town. I got to make some very serious decision for the church. Who's going to help me? Pastor Shaller's, Lord knows where he is. Who do I call? I pull Pastor Barry down. We make a business decision because I just want some help, all right? So in a sense, the Board of Trustees has been, in some ways, as a counselor for the chief operating officer. You know what I'm saying? And it's a parallel situation. So they're counselors for the pastor. The second sort of unofficial role is that they are spiritual leaders for the church, okay? For the church. All right, so you've got possibly, at least we do in Baltimore, maybe in other churches, you have a larger group of elders. Out of that group, certain ones are put on the Board of Elders. These guys are all spiritual leaders for the church, but I'm just saying by virtue of being on the voting governing board, that's going to become known, and when a pastor who happens to be an elder gives an opinion, says something, walks into a room, it just carries more weight than it does when Peter Taggart walks in the room, Okay? That's, because you want the congregation to know who these guys are, right? These are the elders, this is your government. We do that, maybe once every 2 years or something. It's known, and then people know, that's right, he's one of the elders of the church. Well, the elders, vote to send someone on the mission field. Well, who are the elders? Well, it's Pastor Hadley and all these different guys. That becomes known in the church, and so that these guys become, they already were in some way spiritual leaders for the church, but now more so. That position is enhanced because they're not just anybody. Because when push comes to shove, they can their vote is going to be determining the future of the church. All right. So they're counselors for the pastor, they're spiritual leaders for the church, and number 4, as my pen is dying here, they are friends to the pastor. Okay? Okay, so everybody understand this? Now, we're not done here, and maybe some of you guys have had experience you would want to add to that list, but we normally don't talk about this except in these classes, so I think people don't think about it a lot. And then it just happens like so organically. It's just, of course, that's the way it is. You don't think about it, but it's a fact. Now, I would say that each of these unofficial roles, there can be pitfalls that are attached to those roles. Okay? There's possible pitfalls that can happen. All right? Now, in terms of like counseling the pastor, all right? The pitfall is that one of these elders down here gives the pastor some advice, all right? This is what I think you ought to be doing. But there is no vote, like there's no official action of the board. There was a discussion between 2 guys who happened to be elders, but because this guy has in his mind, I'm an elder, I spoke to the pastor. Oh, thanks, Laura, that's great, thank you very much. I got a fresh installment of pens here. Or like a hallway discussion. Maybe the hallway discussion wasn't led by the pastor, but one of the guys on the board will be in the hallway, grab Pastor Schaller, grab somebody else. Hey, what do you think about this? And then in a hallway meeting, Pastor Schaller was going to say, great, yeah, sounds like a great idea. And that guy walks out, and he thinks that the elders just made a decision, and he goes out and starts talking that way. Well, didn't the elders decide that? No, the elders didn't decide it. 3 guys who happened to be elders had a conversation. Maybe the pastor, as the chief administrator of the church, the chief executive of the church, has every right to make that decision. But don't say the elders made a decision when this board didn't have a vote. All right? And that's how it's always going to go. Guys, show me, did the elders decide this? And that's, again, a church of this size, we're dealing with millions of dollars, this stuff becomes very, very important, But a smaller church dealing with thousands of dollars, but to the smaller church, that thousands is a lot of money because they don't have it, and this stuff can get mixed up. And then the other thing, like at least it depends on the person's gift set, all right, and how they think. But the guys who think like categorically, at least in Greater Grace Church, here in Baltimore, the guys who think categorically, who think business-like, they tend to end up on the board of trustees, right? And think and understand how the organization works. And we do tend to end up with guys on the board. This is a generalization, but I think it holds. The guys who end up on the board of elders are not thinking about the organization. They're just believing God. They want to see the work go forward. And they don't think about how the organization works as much as they think about just, what do we do to enhance the work of God? So they can get mixed up sometimes on what's really happening. And then you might even have guys who think boards are a bunch of baloney. It's Pastor Schaller, and we'll have a conversation. That's what really happens. So that's a pitfall here. And the way I would say it is that one of these guys mistakes counsel given that he gives the pastor as definition for the church. So that's a pitfall of counsel. Okay? Does that make sense? I think it does. Did anybody? Okay. Did that make any sense? Okay. Thanks for nodding your head up and down. Appreciate that. I don't think I can. No, I don't know. That's why I was trying to cut it off. No. I'm saying that because people are people, you were here for this whole, you were here since the break, right?
Since the break, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you've heard the whole explanation. That relationships beyond the official relationship develop, okay? These are those relationships, those things that can happen. The first unofficial thing that happens is people are counselors to the pastor, right? So the pitfall of that is that I have a conversation with Pastor Schaller. Because I'm an elder, I don't have clear in my mind, what my role is, what my role isn't. There's no vote, but I walk out of there thinking that that the elders just made a decision because we had an informal conversation. That's my point. I'm not sure what the last thing I said was, but if you got that, we can move on unless you want to bring something else out there. Okay, now, the next thing they are, as we talked about, they're spiritual leaders for the church. Now, this is the thing. This is what we have to understand, all right, is that once, like the higher up in the organization I go, all right, in terms of prominence or leadership positions, the less freedom I have to state a personal opinion, right? I can, the more and more voice I have in the church, the less and the less I can say, because people look at what I say as being authoritative and as being definition, all right? And that is simply how it goes. I had a very good conversation with my wife last week. And okay, so now we're just going to go around the world, my poor wife. But there was a friend of my wife, great person, totally respect him. They had a very strong opinion about something that happened recently. And they grabbed me, because that's my job to listen to these things and take them very seriously, and I do. But this lady is talking to me, and in the course of the conversation where she's strongly stating her case, this is what she said to me. And your wife she says to me, talking about my wife, your wife thinks the same way. That's what was said to me. Now, the person was perfect. I have no problem with the communication, but it's like, I have a conversation with my wife. Just realize you're not just anybody in the church. You're Peter Taggart's wife. I'm not the pastor. I'm not an elder, but I've got a prominent role. And when your opinions aren't opinions anymore. They are, because people will take them and they will use them by virtue of your relationship with me, and that's what can happen, is that you can, because you're an elder now, and it's very difficult to kick you off the board of elders. Not that we want to. It's not. I don't think that way. But it's like you're in a very secure position there. You're there for a reason, because you're an awesome guy. But I'm not just any pastor in the church. Now I'm way up here voting. People know these relationships exist or they assume they do. And now when I say something, all right, I'm using the office that God has given me and that the church has given me, but I'm using that as a platform for my personal opinion, which can be very, very destructive. Very, very destructive, all right? You saw it a couple sessions ago. We were talking about some of the history of the church. Pastor Pete Westera gave an opinion about how it went, and I said, thank you for that opinion. I personally may have agreed with that opinion, but I'm not going to state it, because I can't say that that's the official view of Greater Grace Rural Outreach on that situation. I don't know the church doesn't have an official view. We tried to come up with one, and it was too difficult. We walked away from it. But that's like the danger. You know what I'm saying? I got to be very, very, just in my position, I got to be very careful talking to like our security team here is awesome. I have amazing guys, very, responsive, servants. They'll do anything to help us. But I got to be real careful. It's very difficult for me just to ask a security officer a question when I'm just trying to get information, find out what happened here, without them thinking that Pastor Taggart is giving definition. Like, well, what do you want us to do about it? I don't want you doing anything about it. all right? You've got a department head, Aidan O'Connell. I'm just trying to get some information. I'm not saying anything's wrong. I just noted something. I want to get but don't walk out of here. What is your procedure? That's what I want you to follow. So we got to be very careful, very sensitive to that, that we don't, get, again, guys have egos, and then we also want to influence, right? So we go out, we start stating opinions, we develop a party, Pastor so-and-so's for it, and we try to develop momentum to get something happen, and to influence the church in a certain way. So that's the pitfall of the spiritual leadership position, is that my opinions are taken as definition from the leadership, and I got to be aware of that and be very careful when I start stating things. So now all this stuff I explained. This is, you'll hear this again when you listen to the classes from the undergraduate course, but I'm just spending a little more time with it because that we're at this level right now. Now, this may or may not be the most dangerous one of all, but these guys are friends to the pastor, okay? And thank God that the pastor has friends. Godly friends, men of the word, men who can be his peers, men who can provide him with input that I can't, because I'm not that person. That's why I'm not on that board. Thank God this exists, that he can walk into a place where he can shoot the breeze with his guys and have God be in the middle of it. Now, but there is friends, okay? So now all of a sudden there is friends. The pitfall there is that now we're going to start making decisions that are best for the friendship or best for my friend, but may not be the best for the church, okay? Best for my friend, but may not be the best for the church. How might that go? All right? I've got here's the organization, all right? And I've got a guy who's, he's a pastor. He's the head of some department down here, right, in the organization, all right? But this same guy happens to be on the board of elders, okay? So now he's got this friendship going with the pastor, all right? The pastor, from his role here as the chief executive officer, he's looking down into the organization. He knows there's problems in this department. He wants to fix them, but he knows he can't. If he tries to fix these problems, he's going to bump into this guy, okay? But we're friends, so because I don't want to hurt my friend or hurt the friendship, I can't deal with something that needs to be dealt with in the organization, okay? So that can happen, okay? So we can't let this friendship morph over into sentimentality. It could go the other way also, all right? Maybe the pastor needs to be, whatever you want to call it, confronted, called to account, asked a tough question, but he's my friend, I don't want to hurt him, and my identity is now wrapped up in this relationship, right? Because it's great being friends with the pastor, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to lose that. It's like awesome. Pastor Shal is my buddy, we sit around and drink coffee together. It's awesome, But now I'm not going to bring something to him, which is my duty, right, as an elder to bring it to his attention, but I don't do it because I've developed this friendship and don't want to hurt that friendship, all right? Guys, this is life. This is what happens in churches, all right? And we got to keep we got to keep Christ between us. We have to speak truth to each other, right? All right, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Okay, so we just got to be, that's why this is so sacred, and this is why churches blow up, what I'm saying, because, and tell you guys, it's, dynamics in a home, right, I'm saying, the husband and wife not getting along, kids not getting along, all that happens there. Dynamics in the workplace, that guy said something mean to me and it bothers me, so I'm going to get him back. All that type of stuff. There is no immunity at this level from that stuff because Flesh is flesh, people are people. We got to be aware of it. Being aware of these principles helps us to put a guard up, right? So that we're just aware of the pitfalls and maybe keeps us from crossing a line. It keeps us from crossing a line. And we got to be careful with our friendships and what they become, because we got to keep doctrinal rapport there, right? A true friend, what you really want is the true friend, is the person who's scriptural and is walking with God and will speak the truth to you. That's true friendship. Okay? So that's, again, what I say this course is, people are people. I'm just talking about human characteristics, how people act, what affects us, what motivates us, and how it plays out in these different in these venues of the the governance of the church or the polity of the church and in leadership. Okay, so that's where we are. Now, any questions or comments on that before we go on to the next topic here?
Maybe you'll discuss it later, but like, how does covering come into play, and covering somebody, covering a pastor,
I'd like you to hold that thought, and I'm not sure how this week is going to go, if I'm going to run out of material or if I'm going to have too much, but if we get some downtime, that would be a great thing to talk about. Very, very healthy to talk about that. It's right now, it's not so much in the course, but we could spend some time on that, and we could get good discussion with some of the pastors that are here.
And maybe just like a thing on like gifts, spiritual gifts. I don't know if it's a realistic thing. Like, let's say a pastor is.
I'm going to have you start over again. Let's get the mic going. For those of you who are listening, after the fact, Pastor Pete just asked me about the subject of covering. Maybe we'll get to that this week. I'm not sure if we'll have time, but if we do, Pastor Pete's going to bring that back up again, and then VJ is asking a question or a comment.
Spiritual gifts, like when we are speaking of like senior pastor, board of elders, and friends to pastor. Yes, he has like a group of like elders who he can work with.
Right.
But in terms of spirit, let's say his strength is in one area, and then maybe there is a lot of people in the board with the same kind of strength. I mean, I don't know. But if there is some diversity in that, maybe it would be a better situation.
Yeah. No, that's very good. And and I think something I said earlier, like you want to get people you can work with on these boards, but like the balance of that might be, well, actually we're going to discuss that right now anyway, but I'll answer the question, but the balance of that, people I can work with, do I want to put on the board a bunch of people who think exactly like I do? No. I mean, where's the godly man who has a different point of view of things? And that's the guy who's more helpful. Like, I know I need to be checked. I know I need to be challenged. I know I need someone who's not a yes man, who's working with me, And Pastor Lange a few years ago went to a conference with a guy named Ed Young, who I guess, I don't know where he is, down in Texas or something like that. And Ed Young teaches it this way. It's like, he says this: I don't want yes men, right? I want people to tell me what they're thinking. And then after that he says, but I want yes men. I'm saying I want people that, that were positive or one with, we can go forward. I don't want to get a bunch of people that are just negative. We want people who are positive and can get on board once we make a decision. But in that process, let's have the debate, let's have the discussion. Diversity, of opinion is great. And I would say in some ways, the people, here's a fact of the case. Right now I'm on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different boards for just in various organizations, right? And some of them more active than others. But in some ways, the people that I value the most are the guys who are, I could put it this way, my biggest pain in the neck, you know what I'm saying? Because I know they're not just going to agree with me, they're going to give me an opposing opinion. They're going to fight for their view of it, and we have a good discussion. And I think it's very, very valuable to hear that type of thing. And then different gifts, different perspectives, you know, amen to that. So that's great. Yeah. It's your gift. Okay. So, how do we, populate our Board of Elders? Okay? And when we have a situation with a lot of elders in the church, it's easier to populate a Board of Elders because the guys exist. They're there. Okay? But maybe, sort of related to what VJ was just saying, but maybe a little bit different answer to the question. Do I think we have a problem? I don't think we have a problem, but we have a situation in Baltimore right now where all the guys who are on the board, they're in the church here, okay? And by virtue of that, Pastor Schaller is their pastor, in addition to being, you know, the chairman, of the board chair for the Board of Elders. He is also their pastor, right? And something that I don't know if you hit it in the lectures I gave you from the undergraduate course. What you can have is, we'll put it this way. There's value in people being on the board who are intimately involved with the details of the corporation, of the company, of the church. There's value in that. They know what's going on. When I was on the board of the Bible College for some years, I felt like that board had a problem because guys were, jetting in, flying in, whatever, driving in from around the country. They were not connected to what was going on here, and they were making decisions like almost in a vacuum that were like irrelevant, so separated from reality that they were irrelevant and very frustrating for the staff. And I thought, well-intentioned but not so helpful, okay? So you've got, on the one hand, you have guys over here who are distant from the operation, okay? And then the other hand, you might have guys who are very close to the operation, okay? So when you bring these guys into a board, all right, the advantage is that they know what's going on. But the disadvantage is that they may not be objective. Okay? I don't know if I want to give real life examples. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But you've got like a guy who's running a department, but now he's on the board. Is he in that board meeting making decisions for the church, or is he advocating for his perceived needs of his department, right? This will happen, okay? Now, you bring in someone who's distant from the operation, and you have like the opposite phenomenon, all right? He may be able to look at it objectively, all right? But he may lack knowledge about what's happening. Okay, I'm sorry, not so much for my handwriting there. So I'm saying in terms of, in principle, populating your board, I see value in having both kinds of people, okay? Now, we've got On our board of elders right now, we have a number of people. We've got, Pastor Bruce Wright is on our board. He's pastoring a church up in Havre de Grace. He plays the congas in the band, but that's about all he does here that I'm aware of. He comes to church maybe one service a week. I don't mean to say it didn't sound that right when I said that's all he does here, but he's pastoring a church. So I think that he brings in some objectivity, that maybe wouldn't exist. I have very good, like I work, in my job right now, I work closely with Pastor Aidan O'Connell. And lots of times, like over the years, we've developed a relationship, but lots of times when we're discussing situations, and he's especially strong in this, which is, I think is very healthy. Pastor Taggart, I'm bringing you a situation, but I'm not going to tell you the name of the person involved. I'm going to present to you the facts of the case, because I don't want your knowledge of who this person is to color your judgment. And I think that's a very, very healthy way to think about it. The name doesn't matter. This is the situation. And what you'll find is these guys that are further away can really be like a breath of fresh air, because you're looking at the big picture. Hey, this is God's work. The church is doing great. Pastor Shal is awesome. Thank God for you guys. We have an amazing staff. Now, is this really a problem? I'm saying that, and that can be very, very healthy, where you have a guy who's in the trenches, who's, maybe, some sparks have flown and he's having problems with certain personalities, and he comes into that meeting charged, and these other guys can calm them down, which is great. My experience has more been on the board of trustees. It's great having Doug Brooks walk into meetings, because he's not, his life is down at Hopkins. He has his, he's a very godly man. He's had experience. He was in Budapest, for years as a missionary. But he walks in not knowing a whole lot of the give and take. I really, because he comes in and makes decisions based on principle, not based on the details. So this is a consideration when we populate our boards. All right, that's a consideration. It's sort of related to what VJ was thinking, and I could say possibly something that we might consider here in Baltimore is maybe we would get some guys who are not in this church, to be on the board. I would say that might help. Now, of course, you run into the practicality of it. Can they make it to meetings? Because we have an active, functioning board. They meet once a month. They meet during business hours, usually Monday morning at 8:30 in the morning. If someone has a job, can they get there? And saying if you can't show up at the meetings, what's the point? It's almost like worse. You'd rather not be on the board than be on the board and not make it to meetings. So that's a practical factor. So when Pastor Chris moved to Texas, he resigned from the board, which was, probably a good decision. But I'm just saying maybe it could have happened differently. Let's get the mic over to Pastor Bob.
So have you ever thought about, for people that are not local?
Is that on? Green light?
Yeah.
Okay, go
close
ahead.
enough? Okay.
Okay.
Have you ever thought about, for people that aren't local, doing electronic meetings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where
Yeah.
you have conference calls, because we do that, and we send out the documents, or we share desktops, and we have the discussion, and it's not quite
Right.
the same as if they're in the room.
It's not the same, but
yeah. Everybody gets a chance to participate, and everybody can see what's going on. The only thing you can't see is the facial expressions and
Right.
things like that.
Oh, so you just do it by audio, no video. You don't do the
Right.
video conferencing.
Yeah, we just do by audio.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great. In this day and age, I think it's a great solution to get. And I know we do that with some of the boards I'm on. If guys sick, well, listen, call in. Then you're at the meeting. We can have a discussion. It can be very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. And we tend not to do it that way, because you lose something, but you gain something also. And especially if you go to video conferencing, where you can see the expressions. It's awesome. So this might be there's a good discussion here. Back to, you got Baltimore, we got a lot of, scores of pastors. It's easy to find qualified guys to serve on your board of elders. Now, what do you do if you're in the opposite situation, where it's not like you have too many ordained people, but you don't have enough? And that is the situation that the vast majority of our churches are in. Of the 600 churches around the world, how many of them are big enough to do what we do here, to really have the right kind of guys? Half of them, 1/3 of them, because the churches I go to, it's difficult to just to get those guys. So before I give my recommendation, I just want to repeat what we've said to date so far in this class, is that the more I learn, the more sympathetic I am just to different situations. There's not a one-size-fits-all, just do it this way, because it doesn't work that way because of different situations. And back to the size of the church, there's all sorts of factors that go into it. But what we recommend is, here you are, you're pastor out here. You're pastoring a church of 30 people or whatever. They're good people. You have families coming to church. They're tithing. But you don't have, none of these guys are pastors, you know what I'm saying? If you start picking, Joe body member out of the congregation and put them in that situation, you may, as we said before, you may be setting that person up for failure, because some weighty matter comes before the church. You have a guy in an arena that he is not equipped by God for. It's not that he's a bad guy. It's not that he's not wise. It's not that he's a stable guy, but he just hasn't been equipped and gifted by God to be in that arena, and he's making decisions that he's unable to make, and this can cause real problems. The enemy can attack, and then again, you got a guy on a board, very difficult to get rid of him. You've handed him the keys to the church at that point. Once he's on the board, he has as much power as you do in terms of one vote maybe, and it can be a bad situation. All right, and I've seen that a number of times. Okay, I've seen that a number of times. So the way we are recommending is that the way you want to populate those boards, if you can do it, is you get guys, maybe they're not in your church, but maybe 50 miles away, you know what I'm saying? There's another, hopefully Greater Grace church, and that pastor here agrees to serve for a season on your board, all right? That's what we recommend, and this is kind of what we're pushing, like regionally, there's great gifts, hopefully in the areas that we're in. I had a very good conversation with Pastor Tony about the situation in Switzerland. Well, Pastor Texier comes over from France and helps. I think he was probably an advisor. I don't think he had an official role, but you called him in and asked his assistance. I'm not saying you should do this, but in principle, maybe you could ask some guys in France to serve on your board of elders. You lose something because maybe they don't know the people in the church, they're not intimately involved, but maybe they visit once in a while. Maybe they get to know the people in the church, because those bonds can really happen without tons of face time. You know what I'm saying? A semi-annual visit, let the guy preach, let him hang around for the day. He knows the people, they love it. He adds life to the church, and now he knows what's going on. They're in his heart. That's I think is the best solution I can come up with to having a qualified elders board, as opposed to guys that we call elders and make them governing elders, but they're not spiritual elders, and are put into an arena that can be dangerous. Now, I've seen it work other ways. Maybe you got some guy in the church who's been in the church for 10 years or whatever, very solid guy, godly guy, and he's able to serve successfully. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, and that's why I'm teasing Pastor Bob, because he's been giving me information in dribs and drabs, right? And we spoke when we spoke on Monday, the first bit of information, he told me, well, he had directors. Is that my phone? Okay. So, and then the next day, maybe today, earlier in the day, you found out, they're not just directors, they're ordained pastors. Oh, well, that changes everything. I didn't know that, all right? They're ordained pastors. Okay, they're your directors. And then I found out this evening that not only are they ordained pastors, but they are ordained Greater Grace pastors. So he's got Pastor Harry and Pastor Paul Poe and Pastor Ron DeLewis on his board, and that's why I'm saying that he's living the dream, because he has populated his board with qualified guys, not in his church, but there's a lot less spiritual danger there. There's maybe some danger. They don't know so much what's going on in the church, so maybe a lack of knowledge can happen. But we're not going to, there's much lower risk of shipwrecking these guys' lives by putting them in a position they shouldn't be in, and also less of a danger of, like in terms of the whole friendship relationship thing, now Pastor Bob has guys who are truly his peers that can be his friend, be his counselor, provide maybe some level of spiritual leadership for the church. And as long as, we've talked about those lines, but they're really qualified to do it. And there's lower risk of those relationships falling into a personality rapport, an out-of-doctrine rapport, because these are men of the word who are there, and they've got lives outside of the church, which makes them secure. It's not like they're getting all their identity from what's going on in that room. They're there to help and serve. And that is how I've been recommending it for years. People do it, people don't, none of my business. I don't, do the best you can out there, guys. We're not, like I say, we're not policing it. But I've seen the other side of it, guys, where I think it can go both ways. And I hope I'm saying this sacredly and with some wisdom and not crossing a line here. But I think sometimes pastors are reluctant to do this because they're comfortable having a board that they can control. You know what I'm saying? That no one's gonna mess with me here. And then you put these guys on this board and you make a suggestion, hey, maybe we would get someone else to be on this board. Oh no, we can govern, we know what we're doing here. We can govern our own church, Are you an elder? Well, I'm on the board of elders, but are you an elder? Have you been ordained? Oh no, not ordained. But but it's we can do this ourselves, and they can't always. I'm not. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But those dangers exist. All right. Everybody understand that? I don't think I've stepped on any toes here. I think we're doing okay with this. I hope we're doing okay. What's that?
It's still early.
It's there's still time to, and my voice is going. Am I going to last another hour and a half? I don't know how this is going to go tonight. I'm starting to go here. Microphone. Oh yeah.
I just you said this could go before you made that statement. You said it could go two ways, and you gave one, and I thought there was going to be another way.
What was the way I said it could go?
It's the other one. Explained that it could go badly, so that's the other way. I would assume. Meaning, it could go right, but it could also go bad.
Yeah, well, any situation, there's going to be pitfalls. You know what I'm saying? There's no perfect situation, all right? But I'm not quite, honestly, I don't remember exactly what I was saying there. Okay. Yeah, so I missed that. I didn't hear what I said. I wasn't paying attention when I was speaking. I missed that. Yeah, okay. So that's what that is. Now, related to this, different but the same but different. This is along this same subject. This is the same thing that'll happen. Is maybe we won't whiteboard this. We'll just talk about it. But I go to a certain area, right? I found the church, right? I stay there 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. I have the gift of raising men up, right? And so I get guys in my church, I disciple them. They become men of the word. They have a leadership gift, a teaching gift, a pastor gift, whatever it is. We recognize who they are. We lay hands on them, and now they're pastors. Now they're spiritual elders, right? And then I take that guy, because now in some ways, he is qualified, and put him on my board of elders. Like, what is the problem here? He's ordained. I'm doing it the right way. My board of elders is populated with real elders. What's the problem here? The problem is that you are that guy's spiritual father, right? You are maybe not all he's ever known, but you're a lot of all that he's ever known. And because of the relationship, you raised him up from a child. Is he ever going to be in a situation where he truly is in a place where he can challenge you or question you when you need to be challenged? Maybe, maybe not. But perhaps your word has always been the final word in his life, because of your wisdom, which is real, and the gift that you have from God. You've been guiding him, you've been leading him. When you said, let's do this, he's done it because he's respected you. And now he's in a situation where he has to come to you and maybe challenge you in an area that you don't want to be challenged in. Is it really possible for someone who's my disciple to really, vote against me on the board of elders? Is that possible? I think with some guys it is. But with some guys it isn't. All right? We love our guys. We're proud of our guys. Our job is to raise our guys up. But when we have people that are like our protégés, right? Whatever that word means, and it comes from the French word, means one that we're protecting, I think. I become so invested in this person and his success that I don't recognize the inherent danger in that relationship. I blind myself to it and say there's no problem here, when by definition there could be a problem. Again, take the names out of it. It's not because I'm a bad guy, not because he's a bad guy, not because he's a wimp, not because I'm a tyrant. It has nothing to do with that. But just by nature of the relationship, there is danger there, right? That's why, our president-elect just took all his business interests, handed them over to his family. He's not going to have anything to do with it because of conflict of interest. And this is the type of thing that can happen on boards. And so I'm just saying, be aware of that. I'm saying, Corellia, I think that is the situation in Thailand. When your dad walks into a room in Thailand, right, he is unlike anybody else in that room. I'm saying it's impossible that he can be just another guy. I'm not saying those guys are wimps or aren't men of God and couldn't challenge when needed, but it's just a very different situation. You may have been in that situation in Peru. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But now you're going to, but again, you've got team, and now you're going to Argentina. I don't know what, you had team members in Peru also, but you got the people joining you on your team, like you got Fred Aruna joining you, all right? He's not your disciple. He's been trained by us, you know what I'm saying? So he's in a very different relationship with you than maybe a guy you raised up in Peru and put on your board, right? VJ's in a different relationship with you because you're not all he's ever known. He's jumping on board with Pastor Stan there, but he's been trained by us. He has a life in India. You have a life, right? Okay. You don't have a life. You're going to find one in Argentina now. But this is how it goes, right? And that's the health, and that's why I feel like this training that we have here really would be profitable for everybody. Although what we talk about in this class is just is a little bit interesting. So I don't know if it's for everybody. But this is the value of it, and yeah, this is why we recommend Bible college. This is you can ordain anybody you want to, but do you want to? You got to be careful with this stuff. So I think any questions about that? Questions or comments on what we're talking about now? Let's get the mic over to Andy.
Since we spoke a lot about the pitfalls and the possible dangers in all of the given scenarios, can't some men be distinctly, they're just helping with the operations? If it's a scenario where there's not the spiritual leaders, they're not spiritual leaders, but there's just help needed for the pastor.
Now, you're talking about putting those guys on the board, you mean? On the
Right.
board of elders?
I don't know. It could be a different sort of board, not necessarily elders.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely, that can happen. And I think what I'm really focusing on this class is the Board of Elders, and just, I want us to have qualified elders boards so it can be a board that's equipped to get a church through a crisis. That's what I want. I don't want to get into a crisis and have unequipped people there having their own spiritual lives shipwrecked and making decisions that are not the best for the church, not the best for anybody. That's what I want to avoid. We have two boards here. We have a board of trustees. Those guys are nuts and bolts operational guys. Most of them happen to be pastors. Maybe they all are. No, I think Doug Brooks is not a pastor, but the rest are. But again, we got a lot of pastors here, so we got those guys. But I mean, that's really why we recommend a two-board situation. You know what I'm saying? You put the elders in a situation where they're going to devote themselves to the Word of God and to prayer. Then you get guys who can handle the business of the church. But again, in a small church, how do you do that? And that's maybe, I'm glad, see, this is why I love these questions, because it helps me, And I think there can be guys in a local assembly who can be equipped to serve on a board of trustees and be a big help with the business of the church, certainly under the veto power of the elders. And it just provides a healthy separation of duties. It gets the pastor removed from the money, which is another danger you want to avoid. It gets and it's almost, how do I say this? If you're willing to go outside of your local assembly to populate your board of elders, it's almost easier to populate your board of elders in a small church than it is to populate your board of trustees. See what I'm saying? Because you're trying to, now you got two boards. Who's going to serve on your board of trustees? Who's again, trustees? There's danger there also, but not nowhere near the danger of a board of elders. But and it makes more sense to have a board of trustees populated by local guys who really know what's going on in the church, because they're handling the business. They're approving a budget. The budget's the biggest thing, and then they deal with special business issues as they come up. But it's not easy to do, because do you have the guys? We get 20 people in your church. Who's going to do this stuff? So you end up with. But if you can do it, I think it's an ideal. But it helps, and we've kind of, the church in Dundalk isn't operating right now, but we had, when Pastor Jeff McKeon was over there, he had one board, right? And he was miserable. And then we made it into two boards. Now I get it. I see why you guys teach the way you teach. It leaves me, leaves the elders in charge of the church, but it delegates off stuff to a group of other men who can handle it. This is great. Instead of me sitting in meetings talking about stuff that I'm interested in it, but I really don't want to be here. So that's how we teach it. And then guys do the best they can out there. You've been instructed. I don't think you've been told what to do. You've been recommendations and principles are shared. And if we're aware of those, we can't reach the ideal. We can keep ourselves out of trouble because we can see what's coming. And then when you do have situations, you understand why it's happening. No one's a bad guy here. This is just a result of a small church doing the best it can. This is just people being people, and this is how it goes sometimes, and we get through it instead of, that guy's unspiritual. Once you play that card, there's times to play it, but you're going to play the conspiracy card. You're going to play the rebellion card. All those types of cards. Man, you got to be very careful before you put those on the table. It happens, but we can There's a saying, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think it's worthwhile. When people become marginalized, they become radicalized, right? When people feel like they don't have a seat at the table, they start beating down the door to get a seat at the table, Right or wrong, I think there's going to be a lot of protests down at the inauguration. It's people that feel like they've been cut out of the process unfairly. This is how they act when that happens. I'm not saying they're right, but these people are people. And people in your church will do this. And it's better, a soft answer will turn away wrath. you know? So someone walks into my office, a raving lunatic, what are you doing? I hate you. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, you listen, you see what they have to say, try to get to the substance to it, let them, you know, if they keep on doing this and they're going from person to person, you know, at some point, it's, you know, they're sowing discord and you got to deal with it and it's not pleasant. But maybe if we listen to them and understand what they're saying, if, like I said earlier, if there's something good in what they're saying to me, I say, hey, you know what? You're right about that. We are going to change that. I appreciate that. Thank you that we can calm these people down and now they're no longer marginalized and they have no need to be radicalized. All right? There was a woman in my office last week. I told her once, please don't talk about this situation. We're dealing with it. This is where you're going to get help in this room. Don't talk about it. And then stories come back to us that it's being talked about. I talked to her again. I said, look, you know, I got to correct you on this. Please don't do this anymore. And the fire went out. You know what I'm saying? The fire went out, you know. As far as I know, I haven't heard anything since that time. So we got past it. And that's far different than walking into a rap session and saying, you know, this person's sowing discord. You know what I'm saying? I think they were. But, you know, do I want to tell this person you're evil and then all of a sudden she's been rejected by the church and labeled as evil? What's going to be the result of that? You know what I'm saying? That, you know, what's, you know, am I trying to deal with something? I mean, you know, this is how we speak to our ushers in the church. Okay, so there's a disruption in the church, but if you go and deal with it, is you're dealing with it going to create a bigger disruption than the two teenagers that are talking? You know what I'm saying? And that's, just take that principle and expand it. You know, and then someone came up to me you were in the staff meeting today. I don't know if you saw someone talking to me early in the staff meeting, and they're saying, geez, you know, there's a certain situation, it's being talked about on Facebook, I don't know how you want to deal with it. And I almost said something in the staff meeting about it. I said, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm going to get some more information before I start talking about people shouldn't be doing this on Facebook. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how bad it is. Let me go talk to the department head and see if it's a problem for him. Who's doing it? You can't stop people in your church from talking at some level. I mean, you can, but it's hard, you know, and it's violent to do it. You know, what are you going to kick them out of the church? I mean, if it's someone who should know better, someone who's on my staff, and they shouldn't be doing this, well, that's okay. Look, you know, you work for us. We're writing you a paycheck every week. You can't be doing this stuff. But then you have some new member in the church, a weak member, and they talk to friends. How much of that stuff are you going to try and stop? And how much of that are you going to make worse by trying to stop it? So, right? Am I really helping? Am I throwing water on the fire, or am I adding fuel to the fire? You know? And I don't know why I got on this subject, what I was talking about, but what triggered that tirade? What was that about? What's that? How did I get going on that?
People marginalized.
Yeah, but before that, I thought someone asked something that got me going on that. What was it?
I forget.
See, we all forget. We got short-term memory loss here.
It was about, like, we were talking about the elders.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I think this is where that came from. Yeah. Is you don't have an ideal situation in your church. No church is ideal. There's always problems. Or there's always, you can't set it up 100% the way you want to set it up because people are people, things are changing. We know the advantages and disadvantages of setting it up certain ways. Then when problems arise, if we can trace it back to, hey, we know why this is happening because, you know, we don't have an ideal situation, maybe this board member is acting this way. We know he's maybe not a fully qualified board member, but we did the best we could and we put him there. And he goes out and does something that maybe he shouldn't be doing. Maybe I go easier on that guy because he's the best guy I had in the church. He's not a pastor. I put him on my board. He goes out and does something unbecoming of an elder. Hey, you're on the board of elders. What's the matter with you? Look, we did the best we could. We're a small church in the backwoods of North Carolina. We took a good guy who loves God, put him in a situation. This is how he's acting. How hard am I going to be on this guy? You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to be hard on him. I'm going to thank him for his service. And hey, look, maybe if we did it this way, it would work better. But let's keep at it. Let's learn. Let's learn and grow together. That's what I'm saying here, that we give each other just a ton of grace. And that's the thing, just as they become more and more aware of different situations around the world, and these pastors are out there doing the absolute best they can with what they have. I can't walk in there and say, do it the way Baltimore does it, because they can't, But we can talk about it and apply the principles as best we can. Okay? So it's 7:15. We're going to meet again tonight.